Without knowing the CEO was watching, the maid was dancing in front of the window, and he completely fell for her. Before the story begins, wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Harrison Industries building on that October evening. But Richard Harrison barely noticed. At 42, he'd built an empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation. His corner office on the 38th floor overlooked downtown Chicago, where city lights twinkled like fallen stars. Richard loosened his silk tie, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. Another 16-hour day, another board meeting where millions changed hands with casual handshakes. He walked to the window, seeking a moment of peace in the urban chaos below. That's when he saw her. In the building across the street, a figure moved gracefully in what appeared to be an office space. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, swayed to music only she could hear. Her dark hair caught the fluorescent light as she spun, arms extended, completely lost in her own world. She wore a simple cleaning uniform, but moved with the elegance of a trained dancer. Richard pressed his palm against the cool glass. Transfixed. In 20 years of building his business empire, through 2 failed marriages and countless relationships that felt more like corporate mergers, he'd never felt his heart stop like this. The woman danced with pure joy, unaware that anyone was watching, authentic in a way that felt foreign in his world of calculated moves and strategic partnerships. She twirled near the window, and for a brief moment, her face was illuminated. Beautiful, but more than that, there was something in her expression, a lightness he'd forgotten existed. Richard found himself smiling for the first time in months. Then, as suddenly as it began, the dance ended. She gathered cleaning supplies and disappeared from view, leaving Richard staring at an empty window. But the image was burned into his memory. This mysterious woman who danced like no one was watching, in a building full of people who'd forgotten how to feel. Richard's phone buzzed. His assistant's text reminded him of tomorrow's merger meeting. But for the first time in years, business felt secondary. He had to find her. Who was this woman who'd managed to captivate a man who thought he was immune to such feelings? The next morning, Richard arrived at his office earlier than usual, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious dancer. He positioned himself by the window with his coffee, scanning the building across the street. The cleaning crews typically work evening shifts, he reasoned, so patience would be key. Margaret Walsh, his 60-year-old assistant who'd been with him for 15 years, noticed his distraction immediately. "Mr. Harrison, you seem different today. More energetic." "Just focused on new opportunities, Margaret," Richard replied, not taking his eyes off the opposite building. "Tell me, what do you know about the Meridian office complex across the street?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "That's the Peterson Holdings building. Mix of small businesses and corporate offices." "Why the sudden interest in real estate?" "Research," Richard said vaguely. "I want to know who handles their cleaning services." Through his connections, Richard discovered that Crystal Clean Services maintained the Peterson building. By noon, he'd arranged a meeting with their owner, Frank Costello, under the pretense of considering them for Harrison Industries. "We're a family business," Frank explained in Richard's conference room. "Been serving downtown Chicago for 12 years. Our teams are reliable, thorough, professional. I'm particularly interested in your evening crew quality control," Richard said carefully. "Perhaps I could observe their work firsthand?" Frank looked puzzled, but agreed. "Most of our evening staff are hardworking folks trying to make ends meet. Many are students or single parents. They take pride in their work." That evening, Richard found himself in the lobby of the Peterson building, feeling ridiculous but determined. Frank had arranged for him to shadow the cleaning supervisor. As they rode the elevator up, Richard's heart raced with anticipation. "Floor 15 is usually finished by 8:30, the supervisor mentioned. "Sofia Martinez handles that section." One of our best workers, never misses a shift. Always volunteers for extra hours. Sofia Martinez. Richard finally had a name. Floor 15 was quiet when they arrived. Richard pretended to examine cleaning procedures while searching for her. Then he heard it, soft humming coming from the break room. His pulse quickened. There she was, organizing supplies, moving with the same grace he'd witnessed the night before. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Dark eyes, kind face, but there was something else, a tiredness that spoke of long days and heavy responsibilities. Sofia looked up, startled to see strangers. "Oh, I'm sorry, is everything okay?" "Just quality inspection," the supervisor said. "This is Mr. Harrison. He's considering our services for his company." Richard extended his hand, trying to appear casual despite his racing heart. "Nice to meet you, Sofia." When their hands touched, he felt electricity. Did she feel it too? But what he saw in her eyes wasn't attraction, it was worry. Like someone accustomed to trouble finding her when she least expected it. Sofia Martinez hurried through her cleaning routine the next evening, glancing frequently at her phone. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma was at her neighbor Mrs. Chun's apartment, probably already asleep. Sofia hated working these late shifts. But the extra pay meant Emma could stay in her good school district just a little longer. She was wiping down conference room tables on the 15th floor when she heard footsteps. Turning, she saw the man from yesterday, Mr. Harrison, standing in the doorway looking somewhat lost. "Excuse me," Richard said. His usual boardroom confidence nowhere to be found. "I think I took a wrong turn. I was looking for the restroom?" Sofia smiled, amused by this obviously successful businessman who seemed genuinely confused. "Down the hall, second door on your left. Though I'm not sure why you'd be up here this late. Most offices are closed." "I was having dinner with a client downstairs and got turned around," Richard lied smoothly. In reality, he'd spent the last 3 days finding excuses to be in this building, hoping for another glimpse of her. "Well, the elevator's that way," Sofia pointed, returning to her work. But Richard didn't leave. Instead, he watched her efficient movements, the way she hummed softly while working. "You seem to enjoy what you do." Sofia laughed, but not unkindly. "It's honest work, pays the bills. You have family?" The question made Sofia pause. She'd learned to be careful about personal information, especially with strangers. But something about this man felt different, less predatory than curious. "A daughter, Emma. She's 8. That's a lovely age. Full of questions and endless energy, I imagine. You have children?" Richard's expression grew somber. "No, my ex-wives weren't interested in complications." The raw honesty in his voice surprised Sofia. Most wealthy men she'd encountered, and working in downtown offices, she'd met a few maintained careful facades. This man seemed genuinely lonely. "I should get back to work," Sofia said gently. "My supervisor does surprise checks." "Of course." "I should find that restroom anyway." As Richard turned to leave, Sofia called out, "Mr. Harrison? The elevator's been making strange noises all week. Might want to take the stairs if you're worried about getting stuck." He turned back, smiling. "Thank you for the warning, Sofia." After he left, Sofia found herself thinking about his smile. There'd been something different about it. Not the practiced charm she'd seen from other wealthy men, but something genuine, almost vulnerable. 3 floors down, Richard leaned against the stairwell wall, his heart pounding. She'd remembered his name. More importantly, she'd shown concern for his well-being. Such a small gesture, but in his world of calculated interactions, it felt profound. He pulled out his phone to call his driver, then hesitated. Tomorrow was Saturday. Sofia probably didn't work weekends, but maybe. Richard found himself hoping that Monday evening would come quickly, which was entirely out of character for a man who lived for the rush of constant business. Something was changing in Richard Harrison, and it terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Saturday morning found Sophia at Lincoln Park with Emma, watching her daughter chase pigeons while other families enjoyed the autumn sunshine. Emma's laughter echoed across the playground, and Sophia felt the familiar ache of wanting to give her child more time together, more opportunities, more stability. "Mama, look," Emma called, balancing precariously on the monkey bars. "I can do 5 now." "Careful, sweetheart," Sophia called back, her phone buzzing with a text from her landlord. Another rent increase notice. Sophia's heart sank as she read the numbers. Even with her cleaning job and weekend catering gig, she'd be short by $200 next month. Emma bounded over, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Can we get ice cream?" "Please?" Sophia checked her wallet. $17 until Monday's paycheck. "How about we make ice cream at home? We can experiment with flavors." Emma's face fell slightly, but she nodded. At 8, she was already learning to accept disappointment gracefully, which broke Sophia's heart. Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse apartment, Richard Harrison stood in his empty kitchen, staring at the same breakfast he'd eaten for the past 5 years, black coffee and a protein bar. His housekeeper had prepared elaborate meals that he rarely touched, too busy or distracted to appreciate the effort. But this morning felt different. He kept thinking about Sophia's smile, the way she'd shown genuine concern for a complete stranger. In his world, people only cared about his well-being if it affected their bottom line. Margaret had given him Sophia's basic employment information: single mother, no criminal background. Exemplary work record, but Richard wanted to know more. Not from files or reports. He wanted to understand the woman who danced when she thought no one was watching. By Monday evening, Richard had convinced himself that his interest was purely curiosity. He arrived at the Peterson building with a legitimate excuse this time. He'd actually scheduled a meeting with a client on the 20th floor. But he found himself taking the elevator to the 10th floor first. Sophia was in the break room, counting bills from her wallet with a worried expression. She looked up when he appeared, quickly tucking the money away. "Mr. Harrison, you're becoming a regular visitor." "Richard," he corrected gently. "And I was hoping to ask you something. There's a coffee shop downstairs that stays open late. Would you join me for a cup when your shift ends? I know it's forward, but ... double quotes." Sophia hesitated. Every instinct told her to be careful. Wealthy men didn't randomly ask cleaning ladies for coffee unless they wanted something. But Richard's nervousness seemed genuine, almost boyish. "I don't usually ... double quotes," she began. "I understand if you can't. I just thought, you seem like someone who might have interesting perspectives on things." The compliment caught Sophia off guard. When was the last time someone had valued her thoughts rather than just her labor? "My shift ends at 10, she heard herself saying. "But I can only stay for a few minutes. I have to get home." Richard's smile was radiant. "Of course, thank you, Sophia." As he walked away, Sophia wondered what she'd just agreed to. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than worry. She felt curious. The coffee shop's warm lighting cast a golden glow over their corner table as Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug, stealing glances at the man across from her. Richard had ordered them both lattes and a plate of pastries, insisting she choose whatever looked good. "So," Richard said, genuinely curious, "what's it like raising a daughter in the city? It must be challenging." Sophia smiled, her face lighting up at the mention of Emma. "She's amazing. Smart, funny, always asking questions I can't answer. Like, why do elevators play music, or why don't birds get tired of flying? Those are excellent questions." "What do you tell her?" "That we'll look it up together when we get home. She loves research projects." Sophia's expression grew wistful. She wants to be a scientist. Always mixing things in the kitchen, creating experiments. Richard found himself leaning forward, captivated by the love in her voice. "You're proud of her." "So proud it hurts sometimes," Sophia admitted. I want to give her everything, good schools, opportunities, experiences, but on my salary ... She stopped, realizing she'd revealed too much to this virtual stranger. I'm sorry, Richard said softly. I didn't mean to pry. No. It's single quotes s ... Actually, nice to talk to an adult for once. Most of my conversations involve cartoon characters or playground politics. They talked for another hour. Richard learned that Sophia had moved to Chicago from Texas after Emma's father disappeared, leaving them with nothing but debt. She'd worked multiple jobs while taking night classes, dreaming of becoming a teacher someday. What about you? Sophia asked. What's it like running a... What kind of company do you work for again? Richard hesitated. He'd been deliberately vague about his job, sensing that his wealth might change how she saw him. Technology consulting, he said. Which was technically true. Helping businesses improve their systems. Sounds complicated. Sometimes. But honestly, sitting here with you talking about Emma's experiments feels more real than anything I've done in years. Sophia studied his face, noting the sincerity in his eyes. There was something almost lonely about this well-dressed man who seemed to have everything. I should get home, she said reluctantly, checking her phone. Mrs. Chun is watching Emma, but I don't like to impose too late. Of course, Richard stood, then hesitated. Sophia, would you ... would you mind if I asked you to dinner sometime? Somewhere nice when you're not working? Sophia's internal alarm bells rang. Nice dinners meant expectations, and she couldn't afford complications in her carefully balanced life. Richard, I appreciate this, but I should be honest. I'm not looking for... I mean, my situation is complicated. I can't afford to... I understand, Richard said quickly. I'm not asking for anything complicated. I just enjoy talking with you. When was the last time you had an evening just for yourself? Sophia couldn't remember. But accepting felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. Think about it, Richard asked gently. No pressure. As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Sophia realized she was already thinking about it. Which scared her more than anything. What did this seemingly kind, mysterious man really want from her? Thursday evening, Sophia found herself standing in front of her closet, holding up different outfits with growing frustration. She'd finally agreed to dinner with Richard, partly because Emma had encouraged her. Mama, you never do anything fun. And partly because she was curious about this gentle man who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. But now, faced with her limited wardrobe, reality hit hard. Her best dress was a simple black one from Target, worn to parent-teacher conferences in Emma's school plays. Nothing in her closet seemed appropriate for wherever Richard might take her. You look pretty in everything, Mama, Emma said from the bed, where she was supposedly doing homework but actually watching Sophia's fashion crisis with 8-year-old amusement. Thanks, baby, but I think I might be in over my head here. Emma tilted her head. Considering, is Mr. Richard nice to you? Yes, very nice. Then it doesn't matter what you wear. Nice people care about what's inside, right? That's what you always tell me. Sophia smiled, once again amazed by her daughter's wisdom. You're absolutely right. Meanwhile, Richard paced his penthouse. Equally nervous, but for different reasons. He'd made reservations at Le Bernardin, then canceled, worried it was too formal. Then he'd chosen a trendy bistro, then changed his mind again. Finally, Margaret had intervened. Mr. Harrison, she'd said with the patience of someone who'd watched him agonize over major corporate decisions with less stress. Take her somewhere comfortable where you can actually talk. This isn't a business merger. So he'd chosen Cafe Spiaggia, elegant but approachable, with quiet corners perfect for conversation. When Richard picked up Sophia at her modest apartment building, he was struck by how beautiful she looked in her simple black dress. But more than that, he noticed her nervousness and immediately felt protective. You look lovely, he said sincerely, offering his arm. But if you're not comfortable with this restaurant, we can go anywhere you'd prefer. Sophia's tension eased slightly at his consideration. I trust your judgment. The restaurant was beautiful, but not intimidating. And Richard had specifically requested a quiet table. As they settled in, Sophia marveled at the attention from the staff, the way Richard was clearly recognized and respected. You must eat here often, she observed. Actually, no. I usually eat at my desk or at business dinners. This is... Richard paused, looking almost vulnerable. This is the first time I've taken someone to dinner just because I wanted to spend time with them. In years, the admission hung between them, honest and raw. Richard, Sophia said carefully, I need to ask you something directly. What do you do for work, really? Richard's heart stopped. He'd known this moment would come, but he wasn't prepared for the direct question. Looking into Sophia's trusting eyes, he realized he couldn't build anything meaningful on a foundation of lies. I'm the CEO of Harrison Industries, he said quietly. It's a technology corporation. We're quite large. Sophia stared at him, pieces clicking into place. The expensive clothes, the restaurant staff's deference, the confidence mixed with loneliness. How large? Fortune 500, Richard admitted. About 15,000 employees worldwide. Sophia set down her water glass carefully, her mind reeling. A billionaire. She was having dinner with an actual billionaire. No wonder he'd seemed interested in her thoughts. He probably found her amusing, like an exotic pet. I should go, she said, starting to stand. Sophia, please. Let me explain why I didn't tell you, but the damage was done. The careful walls Sophia had built around her heart slammed back into place. She'd been naive to think a man like Richard Harrison could genuinely care about a cleaning lady. What she didn't see was the devastation in Richard's eyes as she walked away, or how he sat alone at the table for another hour, realizing he'd just lost something precious that he'd barely begun to understand. Sophia barely slept that night, staring at her ceiling while Emma breathed peacefully beside her. The revelation about Richard's identity played on repeat in her mind. CEO of Harrison Industries. She'd looked it up on her phone and felt sick reading about his net worth. Billions, with a B. How stupid she'd been. Thinking a man like that could genuinely care about her opinions, her dreams, her struggles. He'd probably been entertained by her stories about Emma's science experiments and counting bills in the break room. Rich people loved feeling charitable, didn't they? The next evening at work, Sophia threw herself into cleaning with unusual intensity, scrubbing floors until they gleamed. She was determined to put Richard Harrison out of her mind completely. But when she entered the break room on the 10th floor, she found the envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a letter and a check that made her hands tremble. Dear Sophia, the letter began, I know you have every right to hate me for not being honest about who I am. But please understand, I've spent my entire adult life having people pretend to care about me because of my money. When you showed genuine concern about a stranger getting stuck in an elevator, when you shared stories about Emma with such love, when you asked thoughtful questions about my life, those were the first real moments I've experienced in years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove that my feelings for you have nothing to do with charity or entertainment, and everything to do with the fact that you're the most authentic, caring, intelligent woman I've ever met. The check is not an attempt to buy your affection. It's for Emma's education fund, no strings attached. Whether you ever speak to me again or not, your daughter deserves every opportunity to become the scientist she dreams of being. With deepest respect and growing love, Richard. Sophia stared at the check. $50,000 made out to Emma Martinez Education Fund. Her first instinct was anger. How dare he try to solve her problems with money? But as she read the letter again, she heard the loneliness in his words, the desperation of a man who'd never learned how to connect authentically with another person. She folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket, but left the check on the table. Money couldn't fix what was broken between them. 3 floors below, Richard sat in his car in the parking garage, hoping desperately for a text, a call, any sign that Sophia might give him another chance. When his phone remained silent, he realized he'd underestimated the depth of hurt his deception had caused. Margaret found him the next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes, asleep at his desk. "Sir," she said gently, "when was the last time you went home?" Richard looked up, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. "I messed up." "Margaret, badly. With the Martinez woman?" Richard nodded, surprised she knew. Margaret saw everything. "Then fix it," she said simply, "but not with grand gestures or money. Fix it by proving you're worthy of her trust." But how could he prove his worth to a woman who'd already decided he wasn't worth the risk? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of mutual avoidance. Sophia had returned the check through building security with a polite note declining the gift. Richard received the message loud and clear. His money wasn't welcome, and neither was he. But Richard was nothing if not persistent. Instead of grand gestures, he started small. Sophia began finding her usual 15-floor break room, stocked with her favorite tea, the expensive organic blend she'd mentioned craving but never buying. Fresh flowers appeared by the window where she took her brief breaks. Nothing ostentatious, just small touches that said, "I notice you. I remember." Sophia was determined to ignore these gestures, but they were wearing down her resolve, especially when she found a children's science kit addressed to Emma with a note, "For the future scientist, no strings attached. A friend who believes in her potential." Emma's excitement was infectious. "Mama, look. It has everything to make a volcano and grow crystals. Can we try the volcano tonight?" Sophia's heart ached watching her daughter's joy. How could she explain that accepting gifts from Richard was complicated without destroying Emma's happiness? That evening, Richard took an unprecedented step. He left his office at 5 p.m. for the first time in years and went to Lincoln Park. He'd learned from Margaret, who'd done some discreet research, that Sophia and Emma spent Saturday mornings there. He wasn't stalking, he told himself. He just wanted to understand Sophia's world better. From a respectful distance, he watched Sophia push Emma on the swings, both of them laughing as autumn leaves swirled around them. The pure love between mother and daughter was evident in every interaction. Emma would whisper something to Sophia, who would throw back her head and laugh with genuine delight. Richard found himself imagining being part of that circle of love, pushing Emma on swings while Sophia watched with approval. The longing was so intense it physically hurt. "Excuse me," a voice said beside him. An elderly man with a kind face sat down on the adjacent bench. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "I'm Henry. I come here to watch my granddaughter play." "Richard," he replied automatically. "Which one is yours?" Henry pointed to a girl about Emma's age playing on the monkey bars. "That's Lucy. Lost her parents in a car accident 2 years ago. Lives with me and my wife now. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. But you know what I've learned? Children are resilient when they feel loved. Lucy's thriving because she knows she's safe and valued." Henry studied Richard thoughtfully. "You're watching that little dark-haired girl and her mother pretty intently. Everything all right?" Richard was startled by the observation. I care about them. But I've made some mistakes. I'm not sure how to fix things." "Well," Henry said, standing to go collect Lucy, "in my experience, the best way to show someone you care is to support what matters most to them. For that young mother, it's clearly her daughter's happiness and future. Maybe start there." As Henry walked away, Richard realized he'd been approaching this all wrong. Sophia had rejected his money and his attempts to court her directly. But what if he could help Emma in ways that truly mattered? Without putting Sophia in an uncomfortable position, what if he could prove his worth not as a wealthy suitor, but as someone who genuinely wanted to support the dreams of a brilliant 8-year-old scientist? Richard pulled out his phone and began making calls. 2 days later, Sophia received a call that changed everything. "Ms. Martinez?" The voice was professional, friendly. This is Dr. Patricia Williams from the Chicago Science Institute. We're calling about Emma's application to our Young Scientists Saturday program. Sophia's heart stopped. I'm sorry, but Emma didn't apply to any program. There must be a mistake. Actually, she did. We received a wonderful application, including her essay about wanting to make volcanoes that help people instead of hurt them, and her hypothesis about crystal growth patterns. The application fee was sponsored by our Children's Education Foundation, so there's no cost to your family. Sophia sank into a chair, her mind reeling. Could you tell me more about this program? Of course. It's a prestigious 12-week program for gifted children aged 8 to 12. They work with real scientists on age-appropriate research projects. Emma's application was particularly impressive. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, provided a glowing recommendation, and her standardized test scores are exceptional. After hanging up, Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief. Emma's teacher had never mentioned any application. And how had someone gotten Emma's test scores? Unless... Emma, Sophia called to her daughter, who was in the kitchen conducting another experiment with baking soda and vinegar. Sweetheart, did you tell anyone at school about wanting to be a scientist? Emma looked up, her face covered in flour from her latest creation. Oh, Mrs. Patterson said a nice man came to ask about students who love science. I told him about my volcano research and how I want to help people. Sophia's blood ran cold. What nice man, baby? He said his name was Richard. He was really tall and had kind eyes. He asked lots of questions about my experiments and said I was very smart. Sophia felt the world tilt. Richard had gone to Emma's school. He'd spoken to her daughter without permission. The fury that rose in her chest was unlike anything she'd ever felt. She called the school immediately. The principal confirmed that a Mr. Richard Harrison had indeed visited, with proper identification and background check, requesting information about programs for gifted students. Everything had been handled through official channels, with teacher supervision throughout his visit. He was very respectful, Ms. Martinez. He mentioned that he was researching educational opportunities for a colleague's daughter. Mrs. Patterson was quite impressed with his knowledge of child development. But Sophia felt violated. How dare he involve Emma in his attempts to win her over? Her daughter wasn't a pawn in whatever game he was playing. That evening, Sophia stormed into the Harrison Industries building, bypassing security with the confidence of righteous anger. She marched to the elevators, ignoring the receptionist's protests, and rode straight to the top floor. Richard's assistant tried to stop her, but Sophia was past caring about protocol. Where is he? She demanded. Ms. Martinez, Mr. Harrison is in a board meeting. I don't care if he's meeting with the president. Get him, now. Margaret looked at Sophia's blazing eyes and made a decision. She knocked on the conference room door. When Richard saw Sophia through the glass, his face went white. He excused himself from the meeting and approached her cautiously. Sophia, I can explain. How dare you involve my daughter in this? Sophia's voice was deadly quiet, which was somehow more terrifying than if she'd shouted. How dare you go to her school, manipulate her teacher, and use her dreams to get to me? It's not what you think. What I think is that you're a manipulative billionaire who thinks money and power can buy anything, including access to an 8-year-old child. The words hit Richard like physical blows. Because wasn't that exactly what he'd done? But what Sophia didn't know was that Emma's genuine excitement about science, her brilliant questions, and her pure enthusiasm had affected Richard profoundly. For the first time in his life, he'd met a child who reminded him of his own forgotten dreams. The question was, could he make Sophia understand that his actions came from growing love, not manipulation? Sophia, please, just listen for 5 minutes, Richard said, his usual confidence completely shattered. You're absolutely right to be angry, but Emma, don't you dare say her name, Sophia cut him off. You have no right to her name, to her dreams, to anything about her life. Richard ran his hands through his hair, desperation making him reckless with the truth. I know how this looks, but when I met Emma at her school, something happened that I never expected. She reminded me of someone I used to know. Someone I used to be. Despite her fury, something in his voice made Sophia pause. When I was 8 years old, Richard continued, his voice barely above a whisper, I lived in foster care. The Henderson family in Milwaukee. I was obsessed with building things, creating inventions from scraps I found. I dreamed of becoming an engineer who could solve problems and help people. Sophia's anger wavered slightly. She'd read about Richard's background online but found only vague mentions of his humble beginnings. Mrs. Henderson used to say I asked too many questions, that I was too much work. When she caught me taking apart their old radio to see how it worked, she sent me back to the group home, said I was destructive. Richard's eyes were distant, lost in painful memories. I was moved to 7 different homes over the next 4 years. Each time, I learned to hide my curiosity, to make myself smaller and less troublesome. Sophia found herself leaning against the wall, drawn into his story despite herself. By the time I aged out of the system at 18, I'd buried that curious kid completely. I built Harrison Industries on anger and determination, proving to every family who'd rejected me that I was worth something. But I'd forgotten what it felt like to wonder about things, to ask questions just for the joy of discovery. Richard's voice broke slightly. Then I met Emma, and she asked me if I thought volcanoes had feelings. She wondered if crystals could be friends with each other. She had that same light in her eyes that I remember having before it got beaten out of me. Sophia felt tears threatening. She hadn't expected this vulnerability, this connection to her daughter that went beyond manipulation. I'm not trying to buy your love, Sophia. I'm trying to protect something precious that I recognize because I used to have it too. Emma deserves every opportunity to stay curious, to keep asking questions, to believe she can change the world. But you should have asked me first, Sophia said, though her voice had lost its sharp edge. You're absolutely right. I was terrified you'd say no, and I couldn't bear the thought of Emma losing opportunities because of my mistakes with you. Richard stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I handled it wrong, but my motives were pure. I swear to you, Sophia, I would never hurt Emma. She's too precious, too much like who you used to be, Sophia finished softly. Like who I wish I could be again. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Sophia realized she was seeing the real Richard Harrison for the first time, not the confident billionaire, but a lost boy who'd found something of himself in her daughter's wonder. But could she trust him with the most important thing in her world? The program Emma was accepted to, Richard said carefully. It's legitimate. World-class scientists work with these kids. If you decide you never want to see me again, she can still participate. No strings attached. Sophia studied his face, searching for deception and finding only desperate hope. I need time to think, she said finally. Richard nodded, relief flooding his features. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Sophia left, she realized that everything had changed. The question was no longer whether Richard was using them. It was whether she could risk letting someone care about Emma as much as she did. Sophia spent the weekend watching Emma work on her crystal growing experiment, noting how her daughter's eyes sparkled with each discovery. Every question Emma asked, Mama, why do some crystals grow faster? Do you think they're competing or helping each other? Echoed Richard's words about protecting curiosity. Sunday evening, Sophia made a decision that scared her more than any risk she'd ever taken. She called Richard. Sophia? His voice was filled with hope and terror. Emma can participate in the program, she said without preamble. But I have conditions. Anything. You stay away from her school. If you want to know how she's doing, you ask me. And if you ever make decisions about her life without consulting me again, I will disappear so completely you'll never find us. Understood. Thank you, Sophia. You won't regret. I'm not finished. Sophia took a deep breath. I also want to see you again. To try to understand who you really are, not who you've pretended to be. The silence stretched so long Sophia wondered if the call had dropped. Richard, I'm here. I just ... I can't believe you're giving me another chance. One chance, Sophia clarified. Don't waste it. They agreed to meet the following evening, this time at a small cafe near Sophia's neighborhood, her choice, her territory. When Richard arrived, Sophia barely recognized him. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. He looked younger, more vulnerable, and undeniably nervous. Thank you for this, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Tell me about the foster homes, Sophia said directly. All of them. For the next 2 hours, Richard shared stories he'd never told anyone. The Henderson family who'd crushed his curiosity. The Williams family who'd loved him but couldn't afford to keep him when Mr. Williams lost his job. The group home where he'd learned to fight. The final family who'd tried to help but couldn't break through the walls he'd built. I promised myself I'd never need anyone again, Richard admitted. I built my company like a fortress, my relationships like business deals. Everything controlled, nothing left to chance. Then what happened? Sophia asked gently. Richard smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. I saw a woman dancing in a window, and for the first time in 30 years, I remembered what it felt like to want something I couldn't control or buy. Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Richard, I need you to understand something. Emma and we've been hurt before. Her father promised us everything, then disappeared when things got difficult. I can't afford to trust the wrong person again. Tell me about him. Sophia hesitated, then decided Richard deserved the same honesty he'd shown her. Marcus was charming, full of big dreams. He wanted to be an artist, said Emma and I were his inspiration. But when Emma was 3 and I got pregnant again, ... double quote Sophia's voice caught. He said he wasn't ready for that much responsibility. He took our savings and left. You lost the baby? Miscarriage at 5 months. I was devastated, alone, broke. That's when I realized pretty words don't mean anything without actions to back them up. Richard reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. Sophia, I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never abandon you or Emma. You've both become too important to me. Looking into his eyes, Sophia realized she was falling in love with this vulnerable, broken man who saw something precious in her daughter's curiosity, because it reminded him of who he used to be. The question was, did she have the courage to trust again? 3 months later, on a snowy February evening, Sophia found herself in Richard's penthouse for the first time. Emma was at a sleepover with her new friend Lucy, Henry's granddaughter from the park, and Sophia had finally accepted Richard's invitation to see where he lived. The apartment was magnificent but sterile, like a museum display of wealth rather than a home. Sophia wandered through rooms filled with expensive art and furniture that looked like it had never been used. It's not very welcoming, is it? Richard said, watching her reaction. It's beautiful, Sophia said diplomatically. But it's not a home. I know. Richard led her to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I bought this place to prove I'd made it, not because I wanted to live here. Sophia could see her own building in the distance, a modest structure dwarfed by the surrounding skyscrapers. The view is incredible. It's lonely, Richard corrected. I used to stand here at night, looking at all those windows with families inside, wondering what it would feel like to belong somewhere. Over the past 3 months, Sophia had watched Richard transform. He'd started having dinner with her and Emma once a week, approaching each interaction with careful respect for Sophia's boundaries. He'd celebrated when Emma won the science fair with her volcano project, his pride genuine and touching. He'd even learned to play Emma's favorite board games, losing gracefully to an 8-year-old who took competition very seriously. But tonight felt different. More intimate, more real. "Sophia," Richard said, turning from the window to face her, "I have something to tell you, something that changes everything." Sophia's heart stopped. After Marcus, those words terrified her. "I've been offered a position in London. Chief Technology Officer for a consortium of European companies. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Sophia felt the familiar crash of disappointment. The cruel reminder that good things in her life never lasted. "When do you leave?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "That's what I need to talk to you about." Richard moved closer, his eyes intense. "I turned it down." "What? Why?" "Because everything I want is here. You and Emma have become my family." "Sophia, not because I'm trying to replace what you lost, but because you've both taught me what I was missing." Richard pulled out a small velvet box, and Sophia's world tilted. "I know this is fast, and I know you have every reason to be careful. But I love you, Sophia Martinez. I love your strength, your courage, your incredible heart. I love watching you with Emma, seeing how you've raised this amazing little human who asks questions about crystal feelings and volcano emotions." He opened the box, revealing a stunning but elegant ring. "I'm not asking you to say yes right now. I'm asking you to wear this ring and think about building a life together. All three of us." Sophia stared at the ring, then at Richard's hopeful face. "You want Emma too?" "I want to be her stepfather, if she have me. I want to help her with science projects and teach her about business and support every dream she has. I want to give her the stability and love she deserves." Tears streamed down Sophia's face. "Richard, Before you answer," he interrupted gently, "there's something else. I've started a foundation, the Emma Martinez Foundation for Young Scientists. It provides full scholarships and mentorship for kids who might not otherwise have opportunities. Emma inspired it, but she's just the first of many children we're going to help." Sophia's knees went weak. "You named it after her? She's going to change the world someday, Sophia. I want to make sure she has every chance to do it." Looking at this man who'd been broken by a childhood without love and had somehow learned to love again because of her daughter, Sophia realized she'd been protecting herself from the wrong thing. The risk wasn't loving Richard. The risk was missing this chance at the family they'd all been searching for. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Yes to the ring. Yes to building a life together. Yes to all of it." When Richard slipped the ring onto her finger, Sophia felt something she'd thought was lost forever: complete trust in another person. 6 months later, at their small wedding in Lincoln Park, 8-year-old Emma Martinez Harrison stood beside them as maid of honor, wearing a dress covered in tiny crystal patterns. In her speech, she told everyone that sometimes the best experiments happen when you mix ingredients that seem like they shouldn't work together. Richard had never heard anything more scientifically accurate in his life. As they danced their first dance as a family, Sophia caught sight of their reflection in the reception hall windows: a CEO, a former cleaning lady, and a little girl who dreamed of helpful volcanoes, all swaying together to music that felt like coming home. Some love stories begin with grand gestures. The best ones begin with a woman dancing when she thinks no one is watching, and a lonely man learning to see the beauty in unguarded moments. Their story was just beginning,